Hey friends, I just want to invite you to consider joining the Theology and Raw Patreon community. This is a group of followers who believe in the ministry and work of Theology and Raw and want to support it financially. And honestly, I've been so impacted by the people who have chosen to support this podcast. Every month they send in a bunch of questions. A lot of them are really personal, and I get to spend time responding to them in a private podcast. And we'll message each other throughout the month and post responses to each other's questions. I'm actually going to start something new this fall, a monthly live Zoom chat with some of the members, and I'm super looking forward to actually seeing more of their faces every month. And there's other perks that come up, like they all get a free virtual pass to the Theology and Raw Exiles in Babylon conference every year. But honestly, I don't want to make it sound transactional. Every single Patreon member that I've talked to says the same thing. We like all the perks. We're thankful for them, but we're just more thankful to support the ministry of Theology and the Raw, and we're glad to do so. So if this is you, if you've been impacted by Theology and Raw, you can join the Theology and Raw community for a minimum of $5 a month by going to patreon.com/Theology and Raw. That's patreon.com/Theology and Raw. The link is in the show notes. Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Theology and Raw. My two guests today are Ryan Martin and Courtney Trotter. Ryan is the founder and lead instructor at Kairos Classroom, and Courtney is a lead instructor at Kairos Classroom as well. So Kairos Classroom is an online learning platform where you can learn the biblical languages from live teachers. Like, you can be in an actual classroom, not just watch a pre-recorded video, but actually be interacting with somebody who knows the original languages. I love this idea. I think it's daring because the thought that, people are going to pay money to sign up and learn Greek and Hebrew. I could hear a lot of people being, I don't know if this is the best business model. Is there a lot of people that are going to be interested in this? But Ryan, I think, just stepped out and said, you know what, I think this is important. So I'm going to create this learning platform. And they have just been doing a fantastic job. I've promoted them on the podcast before. This is the first time we actually sat down and had a lengthy conversation. And I just love these two leaders. They're fantastic. They have hearts of gold, and they're just have a huge heart for Christians, not just pastors and teachers, but the average everyday Christian having an opportunity to learn Greek and Hebrew. So please welcome to the show for the first time, Ryan and Courtney. Thanks so much, guys, for coming on the show. You guys have a great video setup. Is this because you guys do a lot of video stuff that you have really good equipment over there? Because you look like movie stars, with the background and everything.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I mean, this is our classroom. This is what our students see when they click on the link and jump into class. We want it to feel, cozy and homey for them,
yeah.
like they really are a part of something cool.
You look almost like 3D, like you're coming out of the screen. Or you get really good video equipment.
Well, we are real people. Although I will say that our business partner, Jesse, one of our business partners, is really the one to kind of attribute some of these things to, because it looks fancy, but it's really kind of a home setup. It's not as fancy as a lot of people have it. So
mine's very home setup. I wanted to make sure to get a really good mic. So I would say, what's the best podcasting mic? So I did that. And then I had an audio guy come to this is just my basement. He says all the books and everything add a natural buffer for the sound, and the mic doesn't pick up a lot of outside noise. So he goes, you actually have a decent sound room, even though I have no foam anywhere or anything, but yeah. Well, hey, I want to have you on the show because you guys are doing something that I think most people would think, oh, that wouldn't work. That's not a good business venture to create something that is dependent upon people wanting to learn the original languages in their spare time, maybe. And yet you guys are doing really well and just doing great work. So can you, whoever wants to start, I would love to know why you personally fell in love with studying the Bible in the original languages. Because that's something most people that even learn the languages in seminary, they kind of do it because they have to, right? You guys enjoy, I'm going to assume you actually enjoy reading Greek and Hebrew. Otherwise you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. So where did that come from? How did you guys get that kind of passion?
Yeah, I had no exposure to the biblical languages before seminary. So I mean, it was one of the parts of the seminary curriculum that I was the most excited about. I'd done a little bit of language stuff before, but man, I fell in love with it pretty quick. I loved it. I had great teachers at Beeson Divinity School, and really just loved the way that it opened up the text for different types of questions, and to really know it and be one step closer to it in a way that you really can't when you're just reading in English.
Did you take both Greek and Hebrew, and do you prefer one over the other in your spare time?
Yeah, Greek for me, but I think Courtney will probably answer differently.
Okay, yeah, Courtney, because you guys went to Beeson together. Is that right? Is that how you first met?
We actually didn't meet at Beeson. We were kind of like ships there at the same time, but our paths didn't cross. And Ryan's like, oh, I'm sure we had a conversation at some point. And I was like, Ryan, I'm that kind of person who remembers every conversation I tend to have with people. We didn't. But we got put together after Beeson for this kind of business venture because of our connections at Beeson. So yeah, that's how we got connected for the business. In terms of my interest in languages, they didn't just start in seminary. I grew up, my dad is from Brazil, so I kind of grew up having exposure to another language in the home early on. And whenever I went to visit my family for the first time in Brazil, I realized that wow, this is a whole new world. And the gateway into this world is the language. And so because of that, in high school and everything, I just wanted to study foreign languages as much as possible. And I did my undergrad in languages as well. And so by the time I got to Beeson, and that was also the part of the curriculum I was most excited about, because I just always saw it as a gateway into the world of the people that you wanted to get to know. And in this case, it was the biblical authors themselves. So it was always very exciting going through language classes with that kind of view in mind.
And your bent is towards Hebrew, right? I mean, not that you don't like Greek, but no shade on Courtney Greek, but
Courtney's Greek is great, but yeah.
Well, no shade on Greek.
Yeah.
But the Hebrew is, sorry.
Well, no, you go ahead.
I was going to say, Hebrew is so weird, or the Old Testament in general, just has all these weird things happening. So I always just found the questions there to be more intriguing, which is why I leaned towards Hebrew.
Because so I did Greek and Hebrew I did Greek in undergrad, and then Greek and Hebrew in my MDiv, and then during my PhD, I was in a program where you don't take classes, but you just figure out, you teach yourself what you need to learn. And I did a lot of research in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So that, I feel like that was when my Hebrew really became the best is that it could have been, reading, unpointed Hebrew in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And, there's translations available. So, I mean, you're kind of fumbling your way through. But for how many years I spent in Hebrew, it's not easy. It is such I think because for English speakers or anybody whose original tongue is a Latin language, just the right to left, the kind of Eastern way of the way the language works is just doesn't come natural. How did you get over that? Because I the second I put my foot off the gas on Hebrew, I just ended up losing it. I wouldn't say I totally lost it, but I mean, if I open up the Hebrew text, I mean, I have to I need a lexicon right next to me on pretty much every word, Do you just keep reading it over and over? How did you get it to where you could actually teach Hebrew?
Yeah, so I would say my Greek was even coming out of seminary much better than my Hebrew because of my background in Latin and all the other Latin languages, and Greek kind of syntax kind of works like Latin and stuff like that. But I think that what one of my professors in seminary really got us used to doing was putting a sheet of paper over and below the vowel pointing. So we could just get used to reading the language and kind of anticipating the vowel pointing. And so that's something I really emphasize to all my students today is kind of figuring out which vowel pointing is important and which one's only for pronunciation. Because if you do that, then you're ignoring most of what's happening in your Hebrew Bible, and you're able to just look and read the text.
So for those who don't know Hebrew, basically Hebrew doesn't have any vowels, but in biblical Hebrew, they added these points to kind of signify a vowel, but a native Hebrew speaker doesn't need vowels to just know what vowelish thing is going on with the word. It's trippy. When I first heard that, when I Hebrew 101, I'm like, wait a minute, y'all got no vowels in? How do you read that? You just figure it out, so that's one of the many things about the language is crazy. Ryan, so did you start on your own Kairos Classroom? Was that your brainchild? And then tell me about how that got started.
Yeah, of course. So what you mentioned about would people be into this?
Yeah.
Are there, how could this actually work as a business model? Are there really people out there that want to learn the biblical languages? Well, that would have been my assumption as well. And that's the assumption of so many people that I talk to. I just, as I've traveled around the world and been in a lot of different contexts and just talked with a lot of theologically interested lay people over the years, I just keep on running into people that want to learn Greek and have learned on their own, or like got on YouTube and just kind of watched stuff or bought a textbook. And like what usually happens is they buy a textbook and get 3 chapters in and then realize like, oh, this is real stuff, and then go on to something else. So I think the idea for Kairos comes from like, what if we were to help those kinds of people do that? And sure, we do have students that learned in seminary and forgot, or were supposed to learn in seminary but never really did. Those kind of folks. But more than half of our students are just theologically, biblically interested Christians who want another avenue for Bible study, for spiritual formation. So yeah, I've been surprised over the years, and I'm really happy to be able to have something that kind of helps them in that kind of self-guided, self-motivated process.
So that was my next question, is your student demographic. So you're saying at least half are not like full-time pastors, teachers, like professional Christians? They're just, I hate saying the word just. Yeah, they're just normal Christians.
I like that. Just normal people that love Jesus. Yeah, more than half.
Wow.
They're engineers, they're doctors, they're teachers, they're parents. They've come at all ranges of the spectrum. They just really are excited about learning the Bible. They're Bible nerds, our favorite kind of people.
And do they take like one class, or do they try to get as much as they can? Because as you know, like one semester, one class of the language is enough to just make you discouraged.
Oh, sure. The most exciting and just encouraging thing throughout this whole process has been, I figured just human nature, myself, that a lot of people would start and a few people would finish. That was just kind of my assumptions going on. But I mean, we're finding about half finish, which is amazing.
Which how many?
Far more than half keep going after the first one. Yeah, four classes total, and like Greek 1 through 4, Hebrew 1 through 4. That's just the basic grammar and syntax class. We've started teaching in Greek exegesis classes that are only open to students that have either finished Greek 4 with us or have learned Greek in another seminary university setting. Like basically only open to people to where we say like, hey, that's an aorist participle. They're like, I know what that is.
Okay.
We've gone through Ephesians and Mark. We're offering a class in 1 John in the fall, only for those students. So about 4 classes that go through like the normal grammar syntax sequence.
I feel like that's, for me at least, it wasn't the initial grammar and syntax classes when it really clicked. It's when you take those tools, which you need, that's a foundation, but then when you go to an actual book, right, and you start just working your way through and seeing how the language works itself out in real time in the actual text of scripture, like just reading without thinking too hard, just kind of reading, even if there's a few words you don't know, but like an easy book, 1 John or something, and you just keep familiarizing yourself with the language. I feel like that's when it really started to come alive, like just reading through a grammar. And I did. We worked our way through Dan Wallace's 700-page advanced Greek grammar or whatever, and all the different, all the different datives and genitives and the dative of death or whatever. Like there's so many categories.
We had a professor that used to say, "There's somebody writing a dissertation sitting in a library right now, making up a new kind of genitive."
A new dative, yeah. But to me, that wasn't exciting. It's like, okay, I need to know this stuff for sure. But like, it was taking it to Philippians and working. And then when you see something like, oh, there's nuances here that just cannot come out in English. There's no way to capture this nuance, this emphasis in English. Like you can that's true of any language, right? I mean, you can translate most languages in another language, but there's always going to be those little nuances. My wife is French was her first language. She's born and raised in France, and there's things that like she'll say a phrase, I'm like, what does that mean? She's kind of like, well, it kind of means this, I guess, but there's no way to like, I can't fully explain it. You'd have to know the French culture, even the expressions and the tone, and like it's hard to fully communicate. Anyway, so when did you start Kairos, and what's it been like for the few years you've been doing it?
Yeah, so it started in kind of the height of the first lockdown, the pandemic. So this has been early 2020. And it was just me, way over my head. I mean, it was fun. We were learning Greek, but I have no idea how to run a business. I need, the Lord has brought wonderful people like Courtney and our colleague Jessie that she mentioned into my life. So it was just me until it was summer of the next year. So July of 2021 was when we relaunched. We used to be called Kairos Greek.
Okay.
So if you've seen stuff a long time ago called Kairos Greek, that's still us.
Yeah.
We kind of relaunched as Kairos Classroom, added Hebrew, added these more advanced like exegesis type classes that you've been talking about. Mm-hmm. We're over a year now kind of in our current iteration, and we've already had well over 100 people take a Greek or Hebrew class.
Really? Wow.
Really, really thankful for the way that the Lord has blessed us by bringing us students.
And are you getting more and more interest, or like do you feel like it keeps growing?
Yeah, it really has been surprising to see it keep growing. You kind of hit those peaks and lulls, but recently we've just seen kind of consistent, steady interest. And I think it's just like, it takes a year to kind of get the word out for people to see you, and they're like, put that on their back burner and come back and visit you in like 3 months, and maybe I'll start then. But I also think in general, there's just kind of this craving and hunger for people who are looking for theology podcasts like yours or other podcasts, or there's so many people doing online courses in some form or fashion within their area of expertise. Mm-hmm. And for some people, they're like, I want to learn the Greek and Hebrew. So this is just something that people are craving kind of in this moment.
How is it different than you mentioned? That was another question I wanted to ask. Like it seems like there's just a growing number of online theological training options. Are there other online platforms that do the languages in particular, and how is Kairos different than those, if there is any?
Yeah, there are lots of ways to learn online. I think what we wanted to do that is somewhat unique is to have the entire focus of our school be on live, real-time instruction where students are walking like together. Like you're in a class with other Greek or Hebrew learners that are at your same level, and you're encouraging one another, asking questions. I can't tell you how many times I'll have a student ask a question and another student's like, yeah, I was thinking that same thing. I just didn't know how to articulate it. Real learning happens in community, I think. Or I should say the best learning happens in community. And there really is a sense of just togetherness that we have. Our students not only come from all over the world, but all different theological traditions and different walks of life and ages and political leanings. And sometimes I look at my screen and all the little heads in the little boxes and think, this has got to be the only thing in the world that would bring these people together in this moment. I think that's what's unique, and that's probably what is the most different in the way that we've done things from other options of learning language. So
it's not just like a pre-recorded thing you listen to. This is live, which with the languages, with anything, obviously live teaching is the best, but I would assume with the languages, it's got to be even more so. Would you say that from an educational standpoint, it's even more necessary to have that kind of live interaction?
Yeah, I would think so, because there's always going to be these questions that you have. And if it's a pre-recorded video course, they may not anticipate, that student's particular question or the way that they want to articulate it, or just kind of the expertise. One thing we love to tell our students is that you are an expert. You might not be an expert in Greek or Hebrew yet, but you're an expert in your field. You have a body of knowledge that you're working from. And so a lot of their questions are geared from this current body of knowledge that they already have. And if you're working from a video learning course, it doesn't allow that adaptability for people's individual learning styles and like I said, the knowledge that they're already coming in with. So I feel like it gives us that ability to adapt and tailor our educational emphases to what the students in that class in that moment really need.
So, here's the question I really want to ask you guys. We'll start with Courtney. Why should somebody learn the biblical languages? And again, I'm thinking of the person that's like, obviously if you're a teacher, preacher, there's and no shade on those who don't know yet. But here's an opportunity in front of you to fill that gap. But a good case can be made for people, teaching the Bible to know, have some familiarity with the languages. But for, again, the average Christian, what's your case that they should think about learning the languages?
Yeah, so there's two things I usually say whenever somebody asks me this question, or kind of my little pithy sayings. One is from John Walton, who says that the Bible was written for us, but not to us. And so there is this gap of culture and language, and taking a step further in the language helps you kind of step in the ancient Near East a little bit more than you probably would have if you're just looking at it in English. And then the second thing I tend to say is the Bible is beautiful. And you're able to pick up on some of these nuances in language in your English translation. But sometimes, because our English words are not one for one equivalent for these Hebrew words, these Greek words, you're not able to see just the beauty of the way that these authors are being so careful and intentional with their language. And it's exciting whenever you discover it for the first time. Like, yes, a commentator could draw this out for you, but whenever you're able to see it on the page for yourself, it just brings you to this place of awe and wonder at the beauty of the scripture that lays before us. So that tends to get me excited.
I like that second point. That's because the first point, I feel like that's often what people say. I said it earlier, like you pick up on new, but the beauty part, that's good. Ryan, you anything to add to that, or?
Man, I got nothing to add to that. I'm like goosebumps here. No, that is it. I mean, I'll speak personally and say, for me, somebody who grew up in the church, who's been, large chunks of the New Testament, I feel like I have memorized, not because I've sat down and tried to do it, just because I've sat in the pew my whole life and heard, the Sermon on the Mount read over and over again. And it's easy for me, and this just might be, I don't know, ADHD tendencies or something. I have a tendency when I know something well in English, it's almost like my brain checks out.
Yeah.
And what I noticed real early on learning Greek and Hebrew was that kind of forced slowdown made me pay attention at a level that maybe I could in English, but wasn't. And of course, there's things you can't see in the English. And of course, as we look at different English translations and you're just like, how did these people end up with this? And these translators end up with this. Well, when you know the Greek, when you know the Hebrew, you can say, I see these interpretive things. So we know, it's not that there's not huge things to be seen that we can't see in English, but even just slowing down and paying attention in a way that is hard otherwise was huge for me. And that's one of the reasons I got addicted to it. Just wanted to keep reading and reading and reading.
I was going to say the exact same thing. I was going to add that point. Like, I've noticed when I read in Greek, it slows you down. You start seeing things like, oh, but then you go to your English and like, oh, well, it was there all along. It's just like you said, sometimes you just get familiar and you just get lazy. And so more than just picking up nuances that aren't there in the English, it just forces you to really marinate. Because I find myself, I'll try to do that when reading English, and I just keep my eye. I just want to go faster because I'm like, and Paul the apostle, okay, yeah, like it's just I'm getting so familiar with it. I just naturally just keep going faster and faster, But then you look at the Greek, and you're like, I don't know what half these words are. I gotta look them up. And here's another thing to add too, and this is something I've often said, because I said, look, let's be realistic. Even 2-3 years of Greek, even that you're gonna start scratching the surface. I remember, I had, let's see, I was when did I start? So my junior year in college. No, senior year in college, started learning Greek, took 2 years, and then 3 years in seminary, and then just kept reading. But when I got to my PhD program, they cracked open Philo, first century Jewish philosopher. I'm like, all right, let's start reading. I'm like, I can't read this. And they're like, why not? I'm like, I don't know why not. I can't read this. And like, well, welcome to real Greek, like this is classical Greek. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, like it got a little discouraging that, man, all these years of Koine Greek, and it's a tough language. But here's, to me, one of the biggest payoffs is, as you know, most of the best commentaries on the Bible are dealing with the original languages. So until you have some knowledge of the Greek and Hebrew text, you miss out on following the logic of most of the top. There's a few top-notch commentaries that don't require, but even those are typically, they're going to be on the lighter side. They might be written by Greek scholars, but some of the, like the new, exegetical commentary on the New Testament's really good, or even the New International Commentary. For sure, the International Critical Commentary is nothing but the the Greek text. But these are where the most rich and like thorough conversations are happening on tough passages. Like 1 Timothy 2 is one I've been working through, and there's all kinds of exegetical, hurdles there. But it's like, an English only commentary might spend a page on that passage, where like I just got my I. Howard Marshall ICC on the pastoral epistles, and it's like 20 pages of small print just on 1 Timothy 2, 12 to 15, but like, if you do go really, really deep and say, okay, I want to know what are all the scholarly options here? What are the issues? It's going to be hard to follow those commentaries unless you have some knowledge of the Greek text. Have you thought about that? Would you agree with that, or am I overselling it?
Yeah, I would say actually a lot of our students, like the non-ministerial students, that's the reason why they want to get into it. It's because they've kind of started reading some commentaries, but they realize that they're missing out on like what the significance is between like a nominative and a genitive is, or what the difference is between some of those Hebrew verb stems. Like, why is it important that they're even mentioning that to me? And so I would say that's actually just the accessibility of some of these resources that are available and that are out there, but they're still not accessible because just some of these grammatical terms are not familiar with them.
Courtney, do you have any favorite passage or book or verse or section in the Hebrew Bible that you feel like has been, like when you first started really getting to know Hebrew, like has really kind of opened up to you, that you're like, oh man, I see this passage in a whole new light now? Or I put you on the spot there, so if you're like, I need to think about it.
Yeah, you're putting me on the spot. There are so many, but I would say there's ones that I give to my students that in the first couple of weeks of Hebrew that I think really inspire them. But the one that really inspired me first was when I was looking at Jeremiah 23, 5 and 6, where you have this righteous branch of David who's going to come, this righteous king who will come and will be a good shepherd, right? And then you get down to the end of this passage, and his name is going to be called Yahweh is our righteousness in Hebrew. And so what you see is that David is somehow going to also be Yahweh. And that moment for me really just sent me on fire, thinking like, wow, the Trinity is right there in Jeremiah 23, 5 and 6, that David is somehow Yahweh. And this is a mystery that was, as Paul says, was concealed, but then revealed in Jesus Christ as to how it becomes plain and evident to us. So that was the one in seminary that really kind of lit me on fire.
That's awesome. How about you, Ryan? Anything stand out?
Yeah, I'm glad I had more time to think about it while Courtney's answering. Ephesians was the first book which I'm actually wrapping up teaching Ephesians right now. So full circle, super fun. Ephesians was the first book I read. It was in our Greek 3 class after we'd worked through the grammar and the syntax. And I remember seeing these, the same language that was ascribed to Christ in chapter 1, being raised and seated, seeing that, wow, it's the exact same word in Ephesians 2, but just with soon, just with that little prefixed with. And I mean, maybe you could isolate that word with in your English and take it off, but just seeing like, wow, like Paul is like, he's telling the Christ story, but he's like making it our story. Wow. And that our victory, both Jew and Gentile, our journey from sin and death into the Lord's kingdom of light is just one of our union with Christ, and that we are grafted into that story, and it's just seeing it's the same word, just with a with on the beginning.
That kind of ties into the earlier point about sometimes just slowing down. Like the English word with is not a very exciting word, but when you see Paul, like I think that's even a hapax, right? I mean, it's he almost like creates.
Making up words
to make a theological point, because the theological truth is like has not been captured yet by the Greek language. There's a few times when Paul uses words that we don't have access to, and we don't have other
leasterist. What does he say? He's the least or the most leastest of the apostles. He takes a superlative and puts a what is that, comparative on top of it.
That's
the most leastest of the apostles.
Ephesians 3:8, right? I think it is. Where's my? Where he's talking about how he cannot believe that God has chosen him to be the agent to the Gentiles, and he's so over the top that he kind of creates this word. the super leastest of all these least people.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, man. So how have you seen the light go on with the languages with people that you're teaching? Like, is it that this platform, is it really doing what you were hoping it would do?
It's so awesome, man, to see students in these exegesis classes, like walking through Ephesians, that like a year ago, I was like, here's alpha, here's beta, here's gamma. It is remarkable.
Wow.
And it's really exciting. And I think another light bulb, and I don't mean to say this pejoratively. I think you already, in your conversation with Con Campbell that you had, which was fabulous, by the way. y'all talked about this a little bit. The way that pastors that love the Lord, love their Bible with good intentions, just make these assumptions about how language works, and like really irresponsible ways of using the original languages, like even just like, here's the word, let me look it up in Strong's. Okay, it's that Greek word, let me look that up in a Greek lexicon. Now let me blindly apply all of those possible definitions to every single use of this in the Greek New Testament. Like students pick up on those things really quick because we emphasize them in our program. Like basically reading the Bible responsibly, whether you're reading it in English. And I think those are some of the most exciting light bulbs to watch come on, just because it's, sure, they're learning their Hebrew, sure, they're learning the Greek, but they're also like just growing in their understanding of how language works, and thus how the Bible works and how to read it well.
Do you, and this could for either of you, I feel like learning the languages can either make a student more prideful or more humble. Prideful, we all know what that looks like. They get a semester of Greek under the belt, and all of a sudden now they're correcting their pastor, like, oh, this translation's bad. I'm like, dude, whoever translated that has been studying Greek longer than you've been alive. Maybe it's off. Well, I'm not saying it's inspired, but what's that?
Nothing makes me. I get, what is it, to use a Hebrew expression? My nose is short for students yelling at, or talking about how stupid a Bible translator is. It's like, who do you think you are?
Totally.
That makes sense. That's a really good question.
Well, that or in the humble, for me, I mean, the other side of it is you look at the original languages and like, oh, there's more complexity here. Oh, this word could mean 3 different things, and it's not, crystal clear what the author means here. And so people that think of something like kephale, man or husband, head of the wife, is Christ the head of the church, whatever. Does it kephale mean the source or the authority over, whatever? And obviously this is a really emotional debate, for right reasons. Mm-hmm. But you start looking in and you're like, oh, this word is more complex than what any English word is capable of doing, because you have to translate it some way. You can't, every translation can't have like all these footnotes on here's all the different ways you could
Right.
So I think it does give you a little bit of, should give you some humility of like, oh, there's some complexity, some beautiful complexity. This isn't to like say, well, we can't understand the Bible. It just means that like, no, we need to work hard. We got to put some thought into studying the Bible. I'm just thinking of so many passages right now that I'm working through that are like, even 1 Timothy 2:12, man, I don't permit a woman to teach or exercise authority over man, but that word authority, authentane, is never used in the New Testament. It's not the normal word for authority, and it can be used very differently in other contexts. Sometimes it's translated murder, like it's overpowering, not just exercising godly authority. Right. But then there are some times when it means godly authority. It's like, oh my gosh, like this one word, which has shaped whole church cultures, is really complex, Is that discouraging? Like when you hear that, I mean, how do you, because to me, it makes me excited. Like I'm fine with the complexity, some of the history. Other people are like, no, if it's not like super easy to understand, then my whole faith is rocked. Have you experienced people that go through that kind of like deconstruction, or?
I haven't personally like experienced that, but I think that again, if in our program we emphasize kind of just understanding the Bible in its context and its genre, and like again, that Bible is beautiful, worshipful aspect, and if you really understand the how God could condescend not only in the form of Jesus, but he condescended even in language to us, that he is revealing something to us in the mystery and complexity of that language. And we are here to kind of wrestle with that text, to be the people of Israel, right, who wrestle with God and wrestle with the text that he's given us. And so we hold these things loosely and openly and allow our students to come to different conclusions on how they're wrestling with that text as well. Because like I said, we have people from all different kinds of theological traditions. But I think the humility thing is something that's really exciting for most students, even if they come from a very, strict confessional background.
Have you ever experienced like theological debates erupting, or people does that ever cause tension? I mean, so far you said it's been great.
Yeah, so little. I mean, there's been a few times, like a handful of times, that I felt like as a teacher, I need to put the lid on something.
Really?
But it's been I think part of it is we just get great students. And it's just like the kinds of like avenues that we're using for advertising are just the Lord being good to us. But if I could speak really like, hey, Theology and the Raw listeners, y'all are awesome. And the students that have come to us from you guys are just some of the most awesome people that
have you had some people that specifically came over from Theology and the Raw?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
That's so cool.
And they're great. They're awesome.
Really?
But I think that there's a certain humility and I guess vulnerability, I might be able to say, that comes with just signing up to do this. Like, you know what? I'm acknowledging that there's knowledge out there that I don't have, and I'm here to learn, and I'm here to, with an open mind, to be able to read the Bible in a new way. And I think that spirit, I'd like to think that our teachers cultivate that kind of attitude as well. But students come, I think, excited to learn, ready to listen. And it's not that there's no pushback. It's not that I haven't had students say hold on. What's what? But we've had very, very good conversations. Now in our exegesis classes and stuff, it helps that we're keeping the theologizing to a minimum. Where we're looking at different, here's the ways that different scholars, all that understand the text really well, take this thing. Sometimes we'll say, here are the theological implications of taking it this way or in the other. But at the end of the day, it's like, hey, this is a passive participle, and we can take it as one of means or as manner of temporal, and here's the implications of those things, and you kind of got to make that decision for yourself.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I'm curious, do you assign homework? Well, they have to, right? Of course they do. What does that look like? If somebody signed up for, Greek 1, what kind of demand is that?
Yeah, so it's a class is 90 minutes a week.
Okay.
All of our classes meet once a week for 90 minutes. We ask about that same amount of time outside of class. So another 90 minutes, that's learning some vocabulary, doing some exercises like translation exercises that reinforce what we're doing in class. So 3 hours a week total, hour and a half in class, hour and a half out of class. Really will get you through the grammar and syntax in a year. So at the end of the year, you're reading because it's I was about to say dead language, but Courtney doesn't let me say dead language.
I don't like dead language.
Really? Why?
Ancient language.
Because it's alive.
It's alive. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's still changing and transforming people.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So ancient language. It's we're limiting our vocabulary. So we're not preparing students to read Philo right off the bat. The language of the New Testament. It's we don't have to learn to speak Koine Greek. We don't have to learn to write or we're reading and translating and exegeting. So the game is recognition. I don't need to memorize the perfect form of every verb, as long as I know to look for tense formative kappas and reduplication, and that I have flashcards made for those tricky ones that can throw you off. So it really is possible. I've seen it happen. I've seen students go from Alpha Beta Gamma to working through Ephesians with a commentary in a year, and it's awesome.
If I could speak to your students,
huge qualification. I was
going
to say, just for anyone out there wondering, huge qualification though is there are no tests and quizzes. So there's some homework, but no tests and quizzes, because we're here to learn and to discover and investigate together. And so another real emphasis of ours is review. We spend 30 out of those 90 minutes every single time reviewing the relevant concepts that might be needed for that week. So it's, in my seminary experience, it was you learned that chapter last week, and this week we're moving on to a new chapter. There's sometimes you could get all the way through a semester and forget what you learned at the beginning. And so we kind of try to prevent that gap in learning by reviewing a lot.
you have students that go above and beyond, like they do 4 or 5 extra hours a week and like are just killing it, or?
Yeah, we've had a few of those.
Probably not too many.
They're probably watching right now and they know that I'm talking about them.
Okay.
Yes. But we also do know that there are students who don't always do that because like life happens and they're adults. And so we just tell them, if you can't do anything, do your vocab. Like if you can't do the exercises, do your vocab, because you can always come back and read grammar. Yeah. Still come to class. Yeah.
Here's a few tricks that I learned. So here, just like to dovetail, if anybody is listening, like when you're learning vocab cards, and I did this all through my PhD because I wanted to get my vocab down to like as low as I could, where I off the top of my head knew these words. I didn't have to look them up. I would take a wad of like maybe 20 to 50, I don't know, words. And I would go and I would ride the elliptical machine, because on elliptical, you can keep your head steady, right? So I would go and I would flip cards. I did this with German, French. Actually, I think I did it with Hebrew. I think I knew enough Greek by then that I had all these other languages. But I would flip the cards and just keep flipping them. But when I nailed a word the next time around, I would pull it out, so that I honed in on the words that I didn't know. And I'm telling you, my last 5, I would literally, wouldn't know it, flip it over. Okay, there's a definition. And 5 cards later, I would still not know it. Like, I just saw this word 10 seconds ago. And I just said over and over and over. So the words that I knew right off the top of my head, I'm not spending time. I already know that, and I feel like that was, for me, who is terrible at memorizing languages, did not come natural to me at all. That was really helpful, and you get a workout in. So I would do that every day during lunch. I would go and I would just say, all right, I'm going to, go ride the elliptical for 45 minutes and just flip cards, And also I just found reading the text over and over and over is so helpful. Even now, like I can translate a word and tell you what it means, but I can't tell you all the morphology of like, well, because this theta is here and this, I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. I just know this is a future because I'm just familiar with it. So, I think that's encouraging for people that are just slugging their way through the syntax and grammar. They're like, oh my God, how am I going to keep all this in my mind? And I'm going to say, you don't necessarily have to, like, just that'll be your foundation, but it's kind of like English. Like, I can't tell you half the reasons why this English word means this. It just does, So yeah, slugging your way through a grammar book is not the easiest thing to do, but
no, you're absolutely right. And it's fun to see those light bulbs come on way after the grammar and syntax is done. And like, it's intuitive. Like, I see what genitives are doing now. Yeah. Like you told me in simple language a year ago, and like, I was like, okay, but now I'm in the text and it makes sense. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I mean, we tell students when they're struggling, like, just keep on trudging through. It's going to click. It's going to click when it clicks. Yeah. And clicks different in different orders and in different ways for different people. And I think that's one thing we love about our program, is that we have the flexibility. We have, real life teachers that are talking to you where you are, and we just wait until those things click on.
What's your hope and dream for Kairos? Like, if you could snap your fingers, where would you want to be in 5 years with it?
Oh man.
Courtney, we do have discussions like that sometimes. I'm probably more of the dreamer with Kairos, and I try to sometimes push Ryan a little bit faster. So we are going to be starting a podcast soon where we're able to kind of dig into some of these kind of intricacies within the language and show them to people who don't have any Greek or Hebrew background but might just want to listen to them. So that's one thing. But I also would like us to get into just kind of what would it look like to kind of give some of this platform to our students for themselves, and kind of make it more interactive, and hopefully, we end up with this community that is kind of all over the world, and churches all over the world that's excited and applying this new knowledge theologically within their own church contexts.
You know what I would love, absolutely love, is a podcast, maybe 10 minutes an episode, where somebody is just taking a chunk of the original language, just a passage, maybe it's a couple verses or whatever, and just walks through it and explains what's going on. Because I actually would, even though I just said like half the time I'm reading, I'm like, I know it means this. I'm not sure why. I actually would like to be reminded of, certain constructions or certain particles or just stuff like, what's that word doing now? I don't know, like, or even like, anyway, there's certain nuances of language. And I'm like, I wish I had an expert kind of like walking me through
daily dose of Greek and daily dose of Hebrew.
Do you know, does that
exactly what you just described?
That's what you guys want to do? Because do you know anybody else doing that on a podcast level, to your knowledge?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say it's a podcast level, but Daily Dose of Hebrew does that in like 2 minutes a day. They'll take just like a single verse and just walk through all the different parts of speech within that verse and of how they're interacting.
It's called Daily
Hebrew
Dose?
Hebrew and Greek. They have
Daily Dose. Oh yeah, sorry, that was not. Yes, that's the name of the thing. Daily Dose. It's Plummer at Southern doing the Greek, and is it Futato that does the Hebrew?
It's Futato. Yeah, Futato who does.
They're great. It wouldn't be a way to learn. Like you couldn't learn that way. But if you learned it and you want to keep it up, like that's they're a little short. He'll be like, there's a tens formative sigma, and that tells me this is future. And like it's very, very well done.
And is that a podcast?
YouTube?
Yeah, YouTube. Mm-hmm.
Oh, YouTube. Okay. I guess that would.
It's not like podcast form. It's like just instructional videos. Yeah. Is how I would describe it.
Okay, I'll check it out because So you guys, so you said a podcast. Would it be something kind of like that, but be more expanded, like just working through a passage?
Yeah, and our audience will be people that, of course, people that know Greek and Hebrew, I think will enjoy the discussion. I mean, we're talking about the text itself, right. But I think our most general audience is just anybody who cares about the Bible, kind of trying to take what would you glean exegetically, theologically from the text if you knew Greek, if you knew Hebrew, and how can we bring that? So like we just recorded one on John 1:1 and the absence of the article on theos, and and the word was God, the word was divine, the word was a God. Right. So just walking through like what is Caldwell's rule and what does it mean when God doesn't have an article, and are there other times, like just helping people see
that's really cool.
and understand. Yeah. So things like that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
The closest podcast I could think of, my buddy John Whitaker does. It's called the Listener's Commentary. It's like a 20 to 30 minutes he just walks through books of the Bible. Not in a sermon kind of way, but just like if you were going to read a commentary, what would that look like on audio? It's fantastic. But he knows the languages, so sometimes he'll bring out nuances. But he is really, working through the English text. And I told him, I said, hey, look, you probably don't have a huge audience for this, but like it'd be so cool to do exactly that, but in the original, like assuming the person knows the languages enough to kind of follow along. But he's like, I might have like 5 people, listen to that. But,
yeah.
Wow. So would you like to, more teachers, more classroom, more classes, more students? Is that a huge desire, or are you kind of like, hey, if it stays where it's at, I'm fine too? Or,
No, we want more students.
More students, more teachers. I think also conferences. Everybody wants to do a conference within their own niche, but it would be cool to get the kind of scholars that we read closer to the people who are interested in our type of classes so that they can interact with them together. So I think that would be exciting as well.
And you're not, let me ask I'll just ask it. Like, do you feel like you're competing with seminaries or coming alongside seminary training? Because a lot of these online things, that's kind of the question. Like, are these trying to replace seminaries? Is this a threat? Is this seminaries are losing students? Is it because more people are going online? Or do you feel like is your mission to come alongside, basically providing training for people that can't or wouldn't go attend a seminary?
That, we very much see ourselves as, we're very close. All of our students, this is just for now, all of our students are Beeson, not our students, all of our teachers are Beeson grads. Okay. So this is not been on purpose. It's just connections, and we know that we've known that these are great teachers. And we teach what we call primer courses for people coming into Greek or Hebrew for the first time. We are joining with Beeson Divinity School, and teaching incoming students just the basics. Like even like for Greek, it's like what is, like, even in English, what is a subject and what is an object? Like,
right.
Nominative and accusative are going to be really scary week 2 of class if you don't have these basic categories. So we're supporting the vision of Beeson Divinity School, and you're absolutely right. We are coming alongside. I mean, some of our students that have gone to seminary, they just need kind of the refresher. Most of our students have like our engineers and doctors and teachers, and they're not going to go to seminary. They just want to learn Greek or Hebrew. So very much not in competition with seminaries.
And we have a number of students who also are kind of in their summer break or something like that, and are wanting to stay fresh on their Greek or Hebrew. So like, we really are just kind of an extra tutor in that process. So we're not trying to compete with seminaries. We appreciate their work. Beeson for us was so formative in our lives. And so if you can do that in-person learning experience, it really will change and transform your life. But we realize it's not the opportunity for everyone.
Right. Courtney, did Brian just reach out to you when he was starting this and said, hey, I want you to be a prof here? And is this your full-time job, Courtney, or is this like something you do on the side?
Currently, this is what I'm doing mostly full time. I'm also like working on church planting here in the area that we're in as well. But Ryan kind of started this initially through friends on Facebook or people within his church. And our other business partner, Jesse, was one of those people within his church who decided to just learn Greek for fun. And he was like, hey, I think we should kind of turn this into a business. It's like, what would it look like if we turned it into a business? And so Jesse and like our families are really, really close friends. He's one of our best friends. And so he was like, Courtney, I think you should do this with Ryan. So Jesse was kind of our intermediary with this. And he was the one who wanted to make it into a business. So that's how we started doing it.
And you have
because of Jesse, one of our students.
Taylor Brazil's another instructor I'm seeing on the website.
Yes, we have two. We have another Hebrew teacher, Michael Davis, and another Greek teacher that is coming very soon.
Oh,
so we're growing our teaching community, and I mean I tell my friends I'm self-conscious because I'm surrounding myself with people smarter than me, but these are just fabulous people, and our students love them, and it's been really good to get to know them. And like our criteria is like Bible nerds who are down to earth and can like talk like a normal person. I think like we want people that are really excited about kind of the academic world of biblical studies, but who also like have a heart for walking people through the text and just helping people understand the Bible better and can communicate that in really kind of down to earth kinds of ways.
What's your ideal like teacher to student ratio? Do you want like one teacher for every 10 students or 20 students or something like that?
We cap our classes at 6.
6? Wow. So there's a lot of one-on-one attention. That's wow.
Part of the vision. I mean, this is we think this is important. Like we want every student to feel like they can ask as many questions as they want, so that they have time to where me is. I mean, I've taught a couple classes bigger than 6, and it just feels a little bit like I don't get to know everyone quite as well. I don't get to hear everybody's story. I couldn't, like, when it's a class of 6 or less, I feel like you can ask me about any student. I know kind of what their engagement is and how they're doing, how they're feeling about things, because, we have time and there's the space to engage that. Also, with bigger classes, students tend to clam up. I think there's a sense in which students don't want to, like, some students are afraid to talk in front of others. Some students don't want to take time away from others. But with 6, it just feels like a little cohort. And feels like everybody has a space to kind of be themselves as a learner.
Have you ever gotten together is there any kind of in-person gathering you've tried to form or not? That'd be tough.
Not yet.
You should
not yet. Yeah, that would maybe come eventually.
Here's an idea. You could do something at the Theology and Biblical Studies in Babylon conference next year. I just talked to another guy who he's got a ministry we've sent a lot of people his way too, and like, maybe we'll do kind of a informal gathering there or something. But well, you guys, I love what you guys are doing, and I've struggled. I just saw everybody knows, like, I struggle with the biblical languages. I've gone through many seasons where I don't keep up, where I lose it. So I'm not at all like, I read Greek and Hebrew every day. Like it's been a struggle to learn. But I did it. Once you start seeing some success, it gosh, there's an enjoyment there when all of a sudden you start reading and you're not checking every other word, you're like, I'm starting to get this. Like that's maybe I'm a nerd too. I don't know, but like, there's a thrill there. It's like, wow, this is crazy.
It's a good thing to be.
Yeah, it's worth. Yeah. It's worth. I don't. Okay, here's I got to make sure this doesn't sound offensive. Well, it shouldn't be offensive, but like I people say, well, do I need to know the languages? Sometimes I'll hear pastors say that. And again, if God's thrown you into ministry, you haven't had the money, the ability, the space, you've got 5 kids, you're just struggling just to love your people well. Like there's no shade on anybody who, for very practical reasons, just hasn't had the space to learn the languages. But if you have the space, money, something, if you have 3 extra hours a week, people ask me, do I really need to know the language? Is it really that important? And I will say, anecdotally, I've never met somebody ever who has taken the time to learn the languages who would say, yeah, that I kind of regret doing that. It wasn't really that important. The only people who say, is it really that important, are people that haven't learned the languages. And again, I'm not even the person who doesn't have the ability, whatever, totally get it. But if you do have the space, take that opportunity.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I also think there's people who might have learned in seminary, and this was like the classes they expected to suffer in, and they were very difficult, and that level was up there because you have people who are on a PhD track and some people who are just on a pastoral track in the same class. Yeah. And they often will say to us like, oh, I don't really use that anymore. But I just want to say to them, but you're reading commentaries to prepare for your sermon. Right. And you couldn't do that. You couldn't do that if you didn't have that Greek or Hebrew. So why it might not feel like you're like just translating Ephesians like you did in seminary, like you are using those tools in ways that you're not really always cognizant of. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, thank you guys for coming on. So kairosclassroom.com to check it out. And I hope this didn't sound too sales. I want to have you guys on because I love what you guys are doing. I love people who are into the biblical languages. So this wasn't designed to like, therefore, no, you get a discount with like, but I would highly encourage people, if at all you've been kind of nudged towards, hey, maybe I should at least consider this. You have a free trial lesson on here, I see, right? What is that? What is that? Do they get like a 90-minute session where they can come and sit in and?
It's it's 30 minutes, and it's just a chance to meet with one of our teachers. And if they want to learn just the first few letters of the Greek or Hebrew alphabet, they can. A lot of times students are just like, hey, like, I just want to see like a human face, that this is a real thing. And just talk through a lot of the things that we've talked about in this podcast, just saying what we're about and letting them know how to sign up. But yeah, free trial lesson is awesome. That's how a lot of our students kind of figure out what's going on and join.
One more question. Are you looking for more teachers? What's the criteria for teachers? Like how many years of the language they have to have? And I would assume they can make some extra money if somebody's looking for extra work and do what they love to do. Is that are you guys always looking for new teachers or?
Yeah, so we've kind of just we've been growing kind of organically. So as we've needed more teachers, just because like our class loads are getting, they're looking for other teachers. And I would say like our criteria is, probably like seminary level background and really like an affinity for the languages. And we're, we don't have like strict criterion other than just wanting to be engaging with students, wanting to teach the languages. And we kind of, figure it out as we talk with that individual candidate. And so far, most of them, we've had somewhat of a connection through our seminary, but that doesn't mean we're only hiring Beeson grads, right? So
no, not at all.
If they want to reach out to us, they can on the contact page on our website. And we definitely would love to, we have a little list of people who are kind of the next on our contact list as we continue to grow.
Because I'm sure some people listening are going to be like, hey, I would love to be involved teaching there. So, okay. Well, I'll send them your way then. I'm sure you have a contact page here on your website. So thanks again, you guys. I know I keep trying to land a plane here, but go check out kairosclassroom.com and see if this is a good fit for you. Thank you guys for being on the podcast.
This show is part of the Converge Podcast Network.